My name is Henry T. Simpson. I was a conductor on Casey's last ride. Now, you've all heard of Casey Jones the legend. I want to tell you about Casey Jones the man. You see, I was in the caboose on that ill-fated journey. I was there. I know what happened. Regardless of what anybody might try to tell you, I know.
They should have put out warning signals against us because they knew we had to saw through southbound the way number 2 had done northbound. We saw no flagmen or fusees. We heard no torpedoes. Without any warning, we plowed into that caboose. The wreck occurred at 3:52 a.m. We had only 12 miles to go and 13 minutes to go it in. With a clear track, we would no doubt have arrived at Canton on time. Casey Jones was the only one killed. But if we had been properly warned, Casey might have been living today.
Sims Webb climbed out of the cabin, down the side of the engine as low as he could, leaped to safety and unconsciousness. At that instant, engine number 382 slammed into the caboose of a southbound freight, parked half on the main line, half on a secondary line. It didn't come to a stop until it had plowed through the caboose, a hay car, a corn car, and a flat car loaded with lumber. We were all jarred pretty good, but everybody seemed to be okay. I climbed from the wreckage to check out the passengers. None seriously injured. I ran to the front of the wreck. Sims Webb was just coming to. Where's Casey Jones? Is he okay? Several of us searched through the rubble, and in the midst of the destruction, we found the mangled body of Casey Jones. A bale of hay rested across his chest, while corn lay scattered all about. His hand was still clinging to the air brakes. He had stayed with the train as long as he could. He was the only casualty. His heroic deeds had possibly saved the lives of everyone else. He'd sacrificed himself for Sims, the passengers, the rest of the crew, including myself. Now, the purpose of this inquiry is to establish facts and to offer evidence. And as a result of the facts and evidence, then to establish blame, if any exists, in this terrible accident. Just who was at fault? We, representing the Illinois Central Railroad, believe that we have established enough facts to determine beyond a reasonable doubt that one Jonathan Luther Jones, although normally a very capable engineer, on the early morning of Sunday, April 30th, was incapable of handling his or any other train and is therefore solely responsible for his own death and this terrible accident resulting in personal injury and property damage. Now, you all say Mr. Casey was speeding. You was right. He was speeding. He was ordered to speed by the Illinois Central Railroad like all the engineers is in order to make up for lost time. Now, you all puts them on impossible schedules that they can't keep, and when things go wrong, you blames the engineers. Now, Mr. Casey, he was a good engineer. He was a good, responsible man. And didn't you say we had a bottle in the cabin with us? Another lie. Mr. Casey never mixed whiskey and trains. He loved his job. All his life, that's all he ever wanted to be, was an engineer. He would never do nothing to jeopardize his job. You all is trying to hurt Mr. Casey, and that's wrong. Well, just as he was a-fixing to climb back into the cab, he spotted a group of youngsters about to dash across the tracks in front of his train. Now, they all should have been able to make it, but all at once, one tiny little girl in the rear of the group stopped and stood frozen stiff right in the middle of the tracks. Well, Casey, Jonathan Luther Jones, yelled to her to, "Get off, honey, get off!" But she was petrified with fear, couldn't move. That's when Casey, Jonathan Luther Jones, went into action. He climbed to the front of the engine, down to the cowcatcher, and in one split second, he snatched that little girl out of the path of the train into the safety of his arms. Casey Jones had a layover in Michigan City. We invited him over to our house for supper. Now, as he was coming up the walk, my little daughter, Geneva, jumped off the front porch, ran up to him, and grabbed him around the knees. Now, as he reached down to pick her up, my wife says to him, "Mr. Jones, this is our little daughter. I don't believe you've ever seen her." When she looked into his face, we found out why she was so glad to see him. You see, this was the same little girl that Casey had rescued from the path of the train. It was my little daughter, Geneva, that Casey saved that day. Does that sound like a man who is selfish and irresponsible? It was just then that Casey's oldest boy, Charles, stood to his feet. Your Honor, this is not just a hearing, but it seems my father's on trial here today. Some people here are not just trying to establish factual evidence concerning this tragedy, but are actually trying to destroy the character of a man, my father, Casey Jones. Now, I know I wasn't there at the time of this accident. I know my family hadn't seen my father for a few weeks prior to this accident. I know I can't say what happened that morning or even what kind of lifestyle my dad was living like in Memphis. But I can tell you about my family life and about my father's love for my mother and for his children. Now, since the Illinois Central Railroad has brought up these insinuations about abandonment, I believe it is only just that I be allowed to speak on behalf of my father. Now, I'm grateful that my mom's not here to hear these insinuations brought about by Mr. Tilton. If this were not a formal hearing, I myself would ask you to step outside. There comes a time in our lives which we must all someday face. Just as sure as we lives and breathes and has our being, we each has a destiny to meet. Now, some says it's already decided, while others says we makes up our own. For the man named Casey Jones, it don't really matter now. You see, he's already had his rendezvous with destiny. Now, I can't say what's right or what's wrong in this hearing, but I do know this whole affair is beyond any of us. There's something bigger is going on here. Casey Jones is worth remembering. Now, I myself know him to always be friendly, kind, honest, and true. A man who time and again showed a willingness to give his life for others. We'll all miss Casey Jones. I'm grateful to have known him. Now, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saddened at his departure. For I truly believe that it has to be said of him that greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends.
Come on, you rounders, if you want to hear a story about a brave engineer. Casey Jones was his name. On the icy road he won his fame. The man called Casey about 10:30. Gotta make a run to Canton again. Mounted to the cabins with his orders in his hand. Took a farewell trip to the promised land.